Welcome, you're one-on-one with Wesley Sports Guy here on YouTube.com and at WesleySportsGuy.com as well. Going to jump right into it. The Stanley Cup Finals and NBA Finals are underway as we speak, and looking at it in the Stanley Cup first, it is tied right now at 1 apiece. The Vegas Golden Knights took Game 1, and Washington answered by taking Game 2. Rather exciting games in Vegas in the first two between these two teams, and I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm a little bit surprised in the fact that I didn't expect it to be high-scoring affairs from the get-go, but the Washington Capitals are the better offensive team, and when you look at defense, specifically the entire Stanley Cup playoffs so far, the Vegas Golden Knights are the cream of the crop right now, and looking at how both of these teams are going at it against each other, it's just a high-scoring affair, and you have to like that if you're into constant action, which if you watch hockey on a daily basis, there's always action regardless of the outcome and the score of the game from beginning to end. But when you look at how this series is playing out so far, it's pretty good hockey, and I'm not complaining at all. I mean, if you're a diehard fan or even the casual fan, it's exciting to watch. It's intriguing storylines from both sides of it, where you have arguably the best player in the NHL, in my opinion, Alex Ovechkin, going up against the Vegas Golden Knights, and the story that goes with them being an expansion team. It's their first year in existence, and here they are, Stanley Cup final. But so far, it's been a fairly even matchup altogether between the two teams. But looking at it going long-term, I still have the Vegas Golden Knights winning it in 6 games from the prediction before the series started. You can check that out at WesleySportsGuy.com. If you don't believe me, you can go there and check that. But regardless, looking at it going back to Washington, the Capitals have the advantage taking one in Vegas, but Vegas isn't bad on the road. They're really good, and it should be a stalemate going forward, but I would expect a little more of the same, being a high-scoring affair, but you have to look out for that Vegas defense. They are pretty tough when they're being put up against the wall, and right now they kind of are after losing Game 2 on their home ice. The NBA Finals, you've got the Golden State Warriors and Cleveland Cavaliers. Congratulations, 4 years in a row. Yay, good job for parity in the NBA, but all kidding aside, it is the two best teams in the NBA. You can't argue with that. It's a sad fact in some circles with NBA fans, myself kind of in that, but looking at it from a historical standpoint, it's something that you just never thought you would ever see. Two teams going at it 4 straight years in a row, and it's something to kind of marvel at in this day and age with the way players are constantly moving around via free agency, trades, all that stuff that goes with it. In a business atmosphere for sports, face it, they are a business now. That's just the way it is. I know it's a kid's game, but it's become a business in the professional ranks. And Game 1 did not disappoint. I didn't expect the Cleveland Cavaliers to even have a chance in that game, and they came very close to winning it. And in very stunning fashion, you could say, with J.R. Smith and the way that he decided to get the rebound. You could definitely put it that way. But he also decided to run out the clock for some strange reason, and reading his lips to LeBron James with the constant gifs and memes of LeBron and his reaction to J.R. Smith as the play was happening and unfolding before our eyes. That's comedy in and of itself. You can check that out all over the place. It's everywhere. All of it's pretty funny. But reading J.R. Smith's lips in that moment, it looked to be that he told LeBron James he didn't know about the clock. He didn't know what time was left on the clock. Not that he didn't know the score. I believe him when he says that, but not knowing what was left on the clock. I mean, you had a little over 7 seconds when he got the rebound on that missed free throw. Worst case scenario, you get another foul call on Kevin Durant. He had a pretty good look at the basket and decided to tuck tail and run. So go figure. But again, Cleveland had a chance to win that game. Take Game 1 of the NBA Finals against who everybody says is the heavily favored Golden State Warriors. I don't have them sweeping Cleveland or even winning in 5 games. I had them winning 6 games. And if you want to check out that preview for NBA Finals, you can go to WesleySportsGuy.com as well, along with the Stanley Cup Final. But back to my point on the NBA Finals, you know, with Cleveland nearly taking Game 1, I wouldn't expect them to get Game 2, but crazier things have happened in the NBA recently, and I would be a little more intrigued now watching the NBA Finals. Just because, I mean, it's not only because it's the same two teams again 4 years in a row. It's essentially the same players for the most part, but Cleveland almost got that game. And what's to say they can't take game 2? Golden State, if you're going to fall asleep again in game 2, you're going back to Cleveland. It's their home court. They play differently at home than they do on the road, which goes for almost every NBA team. They play better at home. The role players especially play better at home. They respond to the crowd better than they do on the road. And if you can take at least one game on the road, especially against a team that has home court advantage in the Warriors, you've got a chance to win the series. So going forward, I'm a bit surprised about the start to the NBA Finals, but again, Cleveland got there for a reason. And a huge reason was because of LeBron James. He got 51 points in game 1, by the way, and that's hasn't happened very often. The last time, in fact, that happened was 1993, Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, Phoenix Suns. You don't believe me, look it up, but the knowledge is here. Yes, I did have to look it up before this, but I'm not looking at it right now when I'm talking to you here on YouTube. Time for the segment that makes you ask, Roseanne Barr has a television show? Do you remember?
You remember?
Do you remember the 2005 NBA semifinals? Well, I do, as a matter of fact, because that's also when the Phoenix Suns and San Antonio Spurs were going at it in their playoff days with Mike D'Antoni as the head coach of the Phoenix Suns, and the San Antonio Spurs with Greg Popovich, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, all the usual characters. But with Phoenix Suns, they had Steve Nash, Murray Stoudemire. It was the run-and-gun team of the day. And when you look at the way the Golden State Warriors play nowadays, that's basically taking an homage from what the Phoenix Suns did in the mid-2000s. That team legitimately should have played for at least one NBA championship. That's how good the Phoenix Suns were. They weren't the best defensive team in the world, obviously, but they played a zone 2-3 type of defense. And their offense was just run and gun. Not run you out of the building, but basically just run and find the open shooters and shoot the lights out. And it worked. They won 60 games in 2 occasions during that run with Mike D'Antoni in the 4 seasons for the Phoenix Suns. But it started in 2005, but going to specifically in 2007 with the Phoenix Suns and San Antonio Spurs, they were going out in the Western Conference semifinals. And what ended up happening in Game 4 was a Phoenix Suns victory in San Antonio to tie the series up at 2 apiece. And it was going to go back to Phoenix with all the momentum going to the Suns' favor. Towards the end of the game, Robert Horry decided to launch Steve Nash into the scorer's table, which ended up being a little brouhaha on the court. No fists were thrown or anything like that, but there were 2 suspensions handed out to the Phoenix Suns. That was Murray Stoudemire, their best player at the time, and to also Boris Diaw for leaving the bench during the ruckus on the court. That's a no-no in the NBA, so if you ended up doing that, that's an automatic suspension for the next game. So, of course, Murray Stoudemire and Boris Diaw were both suspended for Game 5 going back to Phoenix. That resulted in a San Antonio victory. It wasn't the biggest victory by far, only a 3-point win, 88-85, but that meant the Spurs had all the momentum back in their favor going back to San Antonio for Game 6, and their eventual victory and series victory, mind you, going to the Western Conference Finals, where they ended up winning, and then going to the NBA Finals and winning another championship. I'm not saying the Phoenix Suns would have won the championship that year, but I'm pretty sure they could have won that series against the San Antonio Spurs had they had Murray Stoudemire for Game 5 in Phoenix. Now, why am I bringing that up now? Well, it's because of what happened just recently in the NBA Finals in Game 1. Tristan Thompson decided to throw an elbow on a shot attempted by Sean Livingston for the Golden State Warriors when it was basically garbage time. The game was over. Instead of getting a shot clock violation, he decided to take a jumper. It was an 18-foot jump shot. It wasn't like a layup or a dunk. I would take a little bit of offense to that if I was Tristan Thompson, and I can understand that. But throwing an elbow on a jump shot, which there was no guarantee was going to go in anyway, you didn't need to do that. And the ref decided to immediately call a flagrant 2 and eject him from the game. And then Tristan Thompson proceeded to get upset at Draymond Green, which it seems like everybody's getting upset with Draymond Green. Just ask Charles Barkley. He can't stop talking about him in postgame and pregame shows. But I digress. He decided, Tristan Thompson, in this matter, to shove the basketball in Draymond Green's face as he's being ejected from the game. Now, did the NBA suspend Tristan Thompson? No, they fined him about $20,000 or $30,000, and they could have suspended Kevin Love for not being on the bench when the ruckus started. But in Kevin Love's defense, supposedly he was already talking to the officials being on the court about something else that happened the previous play. Again, I'm bringing this up mainly because it's a bit contradictory in the NBA's history to want to affect the outcome of a certain series. They're going to let the Cleveland Cavaliers shoot themselves in the foot. They're not going to help them out by taking away Tristan Thompson. They could have at least suspended him for doing what he did, not only on the play, which they ended up reducing the flagrant foul to a flagrant 1, which doesn't mean an automatic suspension now, but they could have at least suspended him for the way he acted afterwards. And Tristan Thompson's defense of it's a play that felt shouldn't have happened. Well, you guys could have played better defense in overtime, then it wouldn't have happened. You could have actually won the game. But again, I'm not going to dogpile on J.R. Smith. We all know it was J.R. Smith's fault for losing game 1. It's time for my feel-good story of the week, and then we go to the NFL. Bit of a different story here as we go with the Twitter account of Delilah Cassidy and her explanation of her travel woes. Going on American Airlines, she realized that they had instituted a new policy where you have to pay for a carry-on onto the plane, which does sound ridiculous in and of itself, but essentially she goes on to say that they were going to charge her $50 for it, and they only took card, no cash. That's all she had on herself coming back from Europe, as she was taking a connecting flight to get back home. And since she couldn't use card, she couldn't use cash, all she had was her plastic, but it wasn't going to work because she had told her bank that she had not come back yet from Europe, so she couldn't use her card. So she didn't have any cash, and she was basically left with a situation where she would have to miss the flight, head back to the ticket counter, and pay down there. But somebody else stepped in, and that would be tight end Jermaine Gresham of the Arizona Cardinals. He decided to pay the $50 in cash to get her on her flight and get her on her way home. So I have to say that is your feel-good story of the week, with Jermaine Gresham paying it forward for $50. And just a quick recap on her Twitter account, Delilah Cassidy. She said, quote, "I'm crying as I write this and as I board the flight. This man was an angel. I stop him as he's sitting in first class and try to give him my money, but he just shook me off and told me to pay it forward." And I would agree with that. Just pay it forward. Be nice. Anybody that's in need, you see that they're in need, just help them out. It doesn't take much. Just help them out, and then again, going on down the line, pay it forward. It's a very nice gesture, and I applaud Jermaine Gresham for doing that, and Delilah Cassidy for sharing that story as well. Thank you for tuning in this week. Make sure you subscribe and hit that Liberty Bell as well to continue to get updates on YouTube for one-on-one with yours truly, Wes the Sports Guy, and also go to westhesportsguy.com for many previews and stories as well as I continue to opine on the world of sports. Thank you for tuning in as always. I'll see you next time for episode 13 here on YouTube.